Memberberries or not, Filoni knows how to work those berries and blitz them up into the finest of smoothies that we happily sit guzzling down for sweet, sweet nourishment that fills our hearts and minds with soulful nostalgia reworked for the context of now, that sincerely moves the emotional journey, overarching narrative, and character directions along significantly.
Are you crying? Am I crying? No, I'm not crying. You're crying.
I fucking love this installment of Ahsoka, as it gave me everything I wanted in terms of plot and usage of the world between worlds, that didn't skimp on aesthetics or acting when we got to return to the age of the Clone Wars for a glimpse into the reality of what Ahsoka was supposed to learn from her time with Anakin, and the weight that she's been carrying around with her ever since, leaning into how it's impacting her and the legacy she's a part of.
And I gotta tell you, it was perfect. Perfect. Everything, down to the last minute details.
I saw much of the speculation, many of the theories, and plenty of concern surrounding this week's episode, with fears around the way this would be presented, what Anakin would be, what Ahsoka would do in the world between worlds, and how much of it would be centered around style over substance. Well, fresh off my 4th viewing of this little masterpiece, I can confidently say your concerns needn't be.
Oh, thank goodness!
As everything stayed faithful to material we'd seen, and it's a thinker for sure, as you must read between the lines here, but if you've not watched Clone Wars and Rebels, you are well and truly fucked, as the symbolism and significance of the moments are going to go over your head.
Got it.
This one begins with Hera, Jaycen and Chop surveying the ruins of Cetos, where they find Huyang embracing Sabine's helmet, who laments that they should have stuck together, and following this we return to Anakin and Ahsoka, offering a little banter where Anakin reveals he's come to complete her training and proceeds to engage her in a duel.
Surprise, motherfucker.
Offering her the option to either live or die. But just to undercut the tension, we shift back to the Cetos seaside for a second, where Carson Teva informs Hera that a New Republic escort has been sent to bring them home, as Hera's about to be sent to the naughty step.
Why are you the way that you are? Honestly, every time I try to do something fun or exciting, you make it not that way.
But right as they're about to leave, Jaycen surprises no one by discovering the clash of Anakin and Ahsoka's lightsabers through the Force.
What? What the fuck?
And as we cut back, we see Ahsoka managing to get one up over her master until he plays sore loser and pulls the path out from under her, sending her crashing to the surface of Ryloth, where she relives her time with him during that first official mission together.
Oh shit. Here we go again.
And we see a young Ahsoka here acknowledging how fucked things were then for Padawans to be leading war efforts and becoming responsible for the lives of others, a burden of which no Jedi should have to carry, let alone a young one, to which Anakin agrees, but he reminds her that you must adjust for the times or you will die. And as Anakin continues, we see a flicker of Anakin to Vader as what I believe is a reflection of Ahsoka's assessment of him, passing between how she chooses to remember him and how she last saw him. With the two intersecting is a reminder that the two are part of him, but also a representation of her Tor mentality right now. After this, we move back to Cetos, where we see the search continue for Ahsoka, and Huyang and Hera discuss the impossibilities of the Force when Chopper locates something in the waters and instructs them to go check it out. And it's here where we cut to another vision from the Siege of Mandalore, where we get a beautiful cameo of Rex, and Anakin approaches her, realizing this was what transpired during his time away murdering younglings.
Comedy.
And it's here where he tells her she's part of a legacy, but one of which she believes is about death and power, which pisses him off as he says before this that she is every part of him as he was of Obi-Wan, and so on and so forth. And if that's the case, then Anakin's legacy to Ahsoka would be the lust for power and control, as we closed out on in Revenge of the Sith. And it's here where Anakin throws everything at her by forcing her to confront her guilt over leaving him before and feeling responsible in some way for his fall to the dark side. So the Master gives her the choice once more to live or die, throwing Ahsoka back to that fight on Malachor, becoming the visage of Vader wearing Anakin's face. To help her overcome this failed student-teacher relationship from her legacy, as we saw with Anakin, Obi-Wan, Qui-Gon, Dooku, and Yoda. And after some incredible choreography, Ahsoka does a Luke and turns away from the hate, choosing to live, accepting that Anakin's fate wasn't her doing, and she confronts her fears and acknowledges that her legacy doesn't define her, but she defines it. And what she does next with Sabine will define that even further, becoming reborn again as the wise one we once knew her to be. And following this, Ahsoka returns to us, and the next day comes up with a plan to use a pod of Purrgil to transport herself and Huyang out to the next galaxy in search of Sabine and Ezra, while Hera must stay and deal with the consequences of her actions and address the New Republic Oversight Committee that will decide whether to suspend her command or not. And we close on Ahsoka and Huyang jetting off as our beloved Togrutan looks the happiest she's looked for some time, with a renewed sense of enthusiasm and determination. Now, I understand the details are rather vague around how Ahsoka managed to enter the world between worlds without a portal or being pulled from that moment, but I believe the possibilities of how aren't as important as why, as Ahsoka didn't seem surprised when she woke up here last episode, but part of the fun is speculating, and Filoni can often leave it to us to fill in the gaps, like some of the mysteries surrounding Mortis and the wolves.
I salute you, sir.
However, I do also believe there is a possible answer here too, and my theory is that Ahsoka has managed to bridge a connection to the cosmic force that makes the world between worlds possible, and either at the point close to death or through her subconsciousness, given she appears in the oceans later, she must have called upon Anakin or have been transported to that realm as maybe a safety net, as Ahsoka has proven time and time again to have a rather unique and spiritual connection to many aspects of the force, so it's not unreasonable to assume that this could be the case, as the world between worlds starts to disappear within the waters, implying she's now left that realm and returned to us. And this might explain why Chopper couldn't pick her up on his scanners initially until after her first memory jaunt, but Jaycen could feel a presence in the realm as she had for a moment left him entirely. It's a tricky thing to navigate with this side of things, but I think whatever your theory may be could be the one, as I doubt Filoni would have written in an explanation unless Huyang quizzes her about it in the next episode. Though I do love that this episode doesn't linger on the minutiae of how and instead focuses on why, getting us to switch our questions to why Anakin is here, which I think is a better way of presenting this, as the audience can ponder on that and instead you can move on to the meat of the story and what Anakin can do for his former apprentice. I think it's entirely subjective as to whether Anakin was there or not, but I'm sticking with my theory that this was within Ahsoka's subconscious projecting into the world between worlds to produce a tangible presence of her master, with maybe the Force responding to that, and as she says in Rebels, the second you start to understand the Force, the more you realise how little you truly know.
No. He's got a point.
And I think that's important to remember when looking at this, as her bond with the Force is powerful and she is capable of performing feats of strength with such a proficiency that we rarely see used, that I think in that moment she was in desperate need, she simply bridged the gap through her mind and cast Anakin there. And I think the brilliance of this taking place in the world between worlds is it allows for Anakin to appear to Ahsoka however he chooses, as that projection can work with the Force, given he seemed to possess his own autonomy here, which offers her the forms that will best pull her out of the rut she's in, which we see with both sides of Skywalker being present. Now, as for the message of this was about Ahsoka's concerns over her legacy, abilities, and guilt regarding Anakin, a mentor and friend who possessed the same concerns that translated to her, with the pressure of the legacy behind him, the fear that he won't be strong enough to save everyone he cares for, and the guilt that he carries for feeling like he failed, is exactly what she had to confront here, and now having lived his life in the worst ways possible, and with a clear sense of reason now, he can show her how to let go, and tries to provide the lesson of releasing yourself from those burdens, which draws the question of how possible is it that he might be a ghost, but I'm still going to stick with my theory. And we saw those fears and concerns actualized in her instant reaction to Shin last episode, as Ahsoka feels a deep sense of dread around training Sabine through the fear of her future becoming that of her masters by losing herself, and therefore Sabine being lost in the fray, which was the lesson Anakin never got to teach her as he never learnt it himself. So the pair are intertwined through the fear of loss and failure, which coincidentally was the reason that Ahsoka was given to Anakin in the first place as a means of teaching him to overcome that, following the death of his mother, but all it did was allow him to grow attached to someone else that he could never work through the loss of. But Ahsoka feels that guilt too by feeling she failed him when leaving the Order, but Anakin doesn't see it that way, at least not this projection of him, and he even demonstrates that by slipping into the Vader persona to tackle her head on and force her to make the choice of life and death, which she confidently chooses, whereas he couldn't before when Palps gave him that same choice. And it's the completion of both their teachings here in a way, but primarily regarding her, he has completed what he set out to do in Tales of the Jedi about the meaning of this very lesson, where there he taught her physically, but now he's teaching her mentally and spiritually by allowing her to complete that fight on Malachor and gain the closure that she sought from that and confront that weight inside her heart over losing her friend. The sparring between them was even evoking that tension from the beginning, where it was never as friendly as it might have seemed, as the last time the pair fought was their duel on Malachor. So this in a way, and especially with how their time ends together, is a means of giving her catharsis on that battle as Ezra ripped her out of that moment. There's a lot of nuance and nods in their duel as well that demonstrate how connected they are, where a lot of Anakin's moves are recognisable from his style in the movies, but what's awesome about this is it's almost a build up for Ahsoka to learn how to combat him. where Anakin was utilising a lot of his own moveset with some swings from Palpatine as well, that Ahsoka would then block by using her master's style of defense, which based on some of Hayden's responses as Anakin, tells us that he knows he needs to go aggressive with this as she's already got him scouted, leading up to the final duel where he confronts her as Vader wearing Anakin's face, trying to draw her in and confront her fears by relinquishing the anger and continuing her life and embracing everything within it, like aiding with the next generation of Padawans in Sabine and Jaycen. And what was incredible about this as well was that it emphasises the fact that the best lightsaber duels are the ones with passion, weight and resolution behind them. All the best choreographed fights in the galaxy will never compare to a narratively driven clash that explains the character's mental state and emotional disposition in place of exposition. The themes of this are that it doesn't matter where you find meaning and growth so long as you learn from what it's trying to tell you, and in the case of Ahsoka, being through visions and memories, the lessons here are all that matter. Anyway, I've spent enough time on this topic, but suffice to say this was incredible storytelling with the Master and Apprentice, giving us the fantastic callbacks whilst adding the intention to them, like discovering Ahsoka's beliefs over her legacy, and the fact that the pair joked around so much throughout the war as a coping mechanism made this relationship feel more grounded and provided some insight for the audiences that are unaware of this pairing entirely. Now, as for everything else, it felt rather misplaced whilst being equally important too, where I simply wanted to see more from Anakin and Ahsoka.
Bagel.
Ugh, you're the worst.
But as we go, we see our little group have to rediscover hope for themselves in the search of Ahsoka in this, and by the end retain that hope as only she and Huyang can leave this galaxy in search of the past, while Hera and her son must stay and deal with the present. The stakes are substantially risen now, with Hera seemingly needing to deal with the idiocracy of the New Republic as they continue to misunderstand where the threats truly are in all this, as they now are buckled in for the steady descent to destruction despite heavy warnings from the likes of Mando, Fennec, Carson and now Hera. And lest we forget the anxiety she must be feeling alongside the pride for Jaycen regarding his innate connections to the Force has got to be one of the best moments I've seen for her character so far, as she's likely never delved into that possibility for him trying to protect him from a future like his father's, except when discussing Kanan. But the difficulty with this is that most of her friends either have or have known people that use the Force, like Ezra, Ahsoka, Sabine and Huyang, and without realising, Leia. So there's not really a way to hide him from that life, especially when Ahsoka hears of what he felt and heard while she was inside the world between worlds. So as dramatic tension goes, I'm very excited to see how this side of things progresses.
Give me what I want. Give me what I want. You know what I want. Give me what I want, or I'm gonna continue to hurt people you love. Give me what I want.
As right now, Hera has just felt like an inclusion so far, with little more to offer than being a visual reminder of what the series is about, and how cool it is to have her back. But drawing back for a second, the mention of Leia was awesome, and it's pretty cool to know that she's interacting with our animated favourites and helping them sneak around, following her time with them in Rebels. But as for Jaycen's Force sensitivity, it makes complete sense to me due to who his father is, and what's even more interesting is that he could hear the events unfold within the world between worlds, which would imply that the realm was there, but that Ahsoka's connection had either called on it or had cast her in there, projecting Anakin inside. It's crazy to me how much personality Huyang has here, with his face being ridiculously expressive, and combined with David Tennant's voice work and delivery, it makes this droid feel unbelievably alive, particularly when caressing Sabine's helmet and then mentioning the wish he had for she and Ahsoka to have stuck together. And this may just be a reach, but I kinda took this as well as almost like he's talking about the Jedi collectively too when he says that they never listen, as he's been a mentor in his own right for centuries and has seen many young ones grow to become overconfident warriors that never saw the greater danger lurking behind them, and despite the knowledge he carries over the Force and lightsabers, there was nothing he could do in their darkest hour. So maybe there's a part of him that will feel relieved or vindicated if Ahsoka and Sabine can succeed in this by working together, and see at least one pair of Jedis become something more than their egos. Huyang has become one of my favourite droids in Star Wars for how charismatic, engaging and thoughtful he is, and to no one's surprise he has carried the show in places where it didn't quite land, so I believe I'm starting to see one of the reasons why Filoni may have brought him back. And lastly, I think it's worth mentioning that the lack of Sabine, Elsbeth, Skoll, Hati, Ezra and Thrawn didn't hurt this, as now we know the remainder of the series will be dedicated to them, but for a moment we needed to deliver on the title and actually take a second to explore our named protagonist, who has taken a backseat for everyone else so far and needed that growth here to set her up for the biggest challenge yet and deliver on the works from years before. I thoroughly enjoyed everyone's involvement in this, with everyone feeling like an essential component, with the dialogue carrying gravitas and the writing feeling composed for a live-action Filoni piece. The visual compositions delivered here were some of the best from the Mandoverse thus far, making for long-lasting visuals that are burned into my retinas, with heavy framing that conveys the characters' positions and mindsets, whilst giving us a sense of scale too, with the height differences and imbalances to the characters. The choreography was phenomenal, with direction behind every swing and strike that all tells part of the story. The music worked in tandem almost perfectly here to underline and hammer down moments with slight riffs to familiar tunes we've heard before, and the costume designs were perfect, demonstrating the care this team has for these characters. And the presence of mind and consideration for portraying these characters, especially from Ariana as Ahsoka and Hayden as Anakin, taking a good chunk of reference from both their Clone Wars counterparts, made this an unbelievable moment of storytelling and rediscovery for me. And as for the mentions and nods, seeing Rex brought a legitimate tear out of me, as did seeing a young Ahsoka introduced almost expertly, and finally having Hayden actualized as Clone Wars Anakin de-aged perfectly as well, with all the cadence and nuance galore, told me how much Hayden believes in this role and what it means to him, Filoni, and the fans. I am here for the remainder of the series without hesitation, with all of my gripes and concerns being washed away by the winds of Cetos, as we now have purely plot to invest in, as our characters are where they need to be, except with maybe one question left to answer, and that was what transpired between Ahsoka and Sabine to cause the breakdown to begin with. But as usual, we'll have to wait and see. As for now though, it's fair to say that this episode is a love letter to Clone Wars fans, but with the care and planning put into the plot, direction and emotional weight that sees this journey begin with Ahsoka finding herself once more. I have to believe it will make this an enjoyable installment for many, but if you find yourself hating on this for any other reason than a credible one, I want you to know that's okay. I'm all for differing opinions, and perspective is good, but there needs to be defined lines and logic behind your criticism, not simply that it's too tailored or member-buried. Anyway, that's all I've got for this one. Thank you so much for stopping by. If you have any thoughts regarding this, you know where to drop them. Please do leave a like on this video, and if you're new, consider subscribing for more down the road. And until next time everyone, take care, and may the Force be with you.